The year was 2347. The galaxy had changed in ways most humans never imagined. Thousands of alien worlds had formed the Galactic Union, a powerful alliance that ruled the stars with massive fleets, advanced weapons, and strict control over lesser worlds. Earth, once full of hope when it first entered space, had long been pushed aside. In the eyes of the galaxy, Earth was nothing more than a floating scrapyard. Its ships were slow, rusty, and old. Its people were mocked across every star system. Some called Earth the graveyard planet. Others called it the broken world. No one feared it. No one respected it. And yet, the people of Earth had no idea what was coming. Deep in the Helix 9 galaxy, hidden in the shadows of a black star, the Galactic Union had gathered its greatest fleet. Thousands of warships stood ready. Their engines glowed with deadly power. Their weapons could destroy entire cities in minutes. At the center of this fleet stood the Titanus Rex, the largest command ship in the Union. On its bridge, surrounded by his top officers, stood High Commander Zorak Vel. Zorak watched the live map of Earth's solar system. His yellow eyes narrowed. His mouth curled into a grin. "It's time to end Earth's place in the stars," Zorak said coldly. His officers nodded without a word. They had waited for this moment for years. Zorak turned toward them. "Send a fleet to Earth. Burn their scrap ships. Silence their leaders. This is not a war. This is a cleansing." The officers obeyed. The fleet turned toward Earth, engines roaring to life. While the fleet moved through the stars, no one on Earth noticed. The planet had grown lazy, unprepared. Most people didn't believe the galaxy cared about them anymore. But Elias Kane knew better. Elias had once been one of Earth's top space engineers. He had designed ships, weapons, and engines. But Earth's leaders had buried most of his work. They were afraid to push back against the Union. They were afraid to build anything that looked like a threat. So Elias had left. He spent the last 10 years working in the shadows, repairing broken ships for poor settlers on the edges of the solar system. He never spoke about his past. He never spoke about the ship he had once built but never finished. That ship was JF007, a dangerous prototype the world had locked away in fear. It had been called a failure, a death trap, a mistake, but Elias had never forgotten it. And when the invasion orders leaked through secret channels to Earth's underground networks, Elias knew exactly what was about to happen. He rushed to the old military data vault in New London, breaking through security locks with codes only he knew. He pulled up the classified files. There it was, the invasion plan, marked as Operation Earth Silence. Elias's heart pounded. Earth's leaders were already preparing to surrender. He could see it in the sealed orders. They had no plan of fight. They had no fleet left. No one believed Earth had a chance. Except him. Elias stood in the dark vault, staring at the glowing screen. He knew what he had to do. He knew where the ship was hidden. He knew only one ship could face the Armada. He whispered to himself, JF007. Elias didn't waste a second. He sent hidden signals to his old team. People he trusted. People who never stopped believing. He told them to meet him at Hangar 17, deep beneath the old Earth Defense Command. As the fleet moved closer to Earth, Elias prepared for the impossible. He knew the ship was dangerous. He knew it had almost killed him once before. But this time there was no choice. This time, Earth had nothing left to lose. And as Elias walked out of the vault, one thought stayed in his mind. Let them laugh at Earth's scrap ship. We'll show them what forgotten junk can do. The night skies over New London looked peaceful, but deep below the city, in the abandoned levels of Earth's old defense command, a different story was unfolding. Elias Kane stood in the middle of Hangar 17, staring at the giant ship that lay silent in front of him. The ship was covered in dust, rusted in some places, and covered with warning signs. Thick metal beams held in place like chains locking up a monster. Long forgotten by Earth's military, this was the prototype warship JF007. Its full name was once Judgment Frigate 007, but most people called it Junk Frigate 007 before it was shut down. It had been designed to push the limits of space combat. Armed with unstable energy cores and built from mixed materials, some human, some alien technology, It was faster, stronger, and more dangerous than anything Earth had ever made. But it had one problem. No one could control it. Years ago, during its first test flight, the ship's power core had almost exploded. Systems failed. Life support nearly collapsed. Earth's leaders panicked. They shut down the project and buried the ship here under tons of concrete and steel. No one ever touched it again. Until now, Elias heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Sarah Holt, his old tech specialist, walking in. Her sharp eyes scanned the ship as she shook her head. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" she asked. Elias nodded. "I am." More footsteps followed. Tanner Briggs, the best pilot Elias had ever worked with, arrived next. His usual grin faded when he saw the ship. "This thing almost killed us once," Tanner muttered. "Now you want to fly it into a war?" Elias faced them both. "We don't have a choice." Next came Dr. Mei Lin, quiet but brilliant. She was the only one who had truly understood the ship's unstable power core. She walked up without a word, running her hand over the cold metal of JF007. Her face showed no fear, only deep thought. Finally, Reed Maddox arrived, the team's weapons expert. He crossed his arms and gave a low whistle. "Looks worse than I remember," Reed said. Elias gathered them close. "The Galactic Union is on its way," Elias explained. "Earth's leaders are surrendering. We're the only ones left who might stand a chance." Sarah shook her head. "The ship isn't safe. You know that." Elias nodded. "I do, but it's all we've got." Silence filled the hangar. Finally, Tanner let out a heavy breath. "Well, guess we're dead either way," he said with a crooked smile. "Might as well go down fighting." One by one, the team nodded. They knew the risks, but they had all spent their lives building ships like this. They knew every bolt, every wire, every line of code. If anyone could bring JF007 back to life, it was them. The crew got to work. First, they cut away the locks and braces holding the ship down. Sparks flew as metal hit the floor. Dust filled the air as the old engines were exposed. Elias climbed inside the ship's control deck. It smelled like burned circuits and old oil. The control panels flickered weakly, as if the ship itself was waking up after a long sleep. Sarah and Dr. Lin moved to the engineering bay. They opened the power core chamber. The core, glowing faintly blue, hummed with unstable energy. It looked like it could either power the ship or destroy it in seconds. Reed ran system checks on the weapons. He shook his head as half the targeting systems failed to respond. Tanner fired up the engine controls. The ship rattled like it was about to fall apart. Everything felt like a bad idea, but no one stopped. Hours turned into days. They worked in silence, only speaking when necessary. They replaced damaged cables, rebooted dead systems, and welded broken panels. Each fix felt like a gamble. Each success felt like one step closer to survival. On the third night, the ship's lights finally powered on fully. The crew stood together on the deck as JF007 came alive for the first time in years. Elias took a deep breath. "Let's run the first full system test," he ordered. The crew took their stations. Tanner fired the engines. The ship roared, shaking the entire hangar. Sparks flew from the ceiling. Sarah activated the shields. They flickered, barely holding. Dr. Lin checked the core readings. The numbers jumped wildly. Suddenly, alarms blared. The power core overloaded. The ship shook violently. "Core's unstable," Dr. Lin shouted. "We're losing pressure." Sarah yelled. "Engines going critical." Tanner warned. Elias grabbed the manual shutdown lever and pulled with all his strength. The ship powered down with a deafening hiss, plunging the hangar into silence. The crew sat in shock, breathing hard. Sarah slammed her fist on the console. "We're going to die in this thing." Elias stood up slowly. "Not if we fix it," he said quietly. The crew looked at him. His face showed no fear, only determination. "We'll fix it," Elias repeated. "We have to." The crew exchanged tired glances. Then, without another word, they returned to work. They knew the ship was dangerous. They knew failure could mean death. But they also knew Earth had no other chance. They would keep fighting. They would keep building. Because JF007 was all they had left. and the galaxy would soon learn that Earth's scrap ship still had life in it. The sky above Earth was clear and quiet. On the surface, people went about their lives, unaware of what was coming. Children played in the streets. Workers filled the cities. Ships came and went from the old spaceports. Life seemed normal, but far beyond the planet, hidden in the darkness of space, death was on its way. The Galactic Union Armada had arrived. Thousands of ships filled the black sky beyond Earth's orbit. Their engines glowed like burning stars. Warships of every size formed tight lines, surrounding Earth like a metal cage. At the center of the fleet stood the Titanus Rex, larger than any city on Earth. On its bridge, High Commander Zorak Vel stood with his officers. His face showed no emotion, only cold focus. He raised his hand. "Open the channel," Zorak ordered. Across every screen, on every frequency, the people of Earth saw his face. Zorak's voice echoed through the cities, the stations, and the homes. "People of Earth," he began, "you stand in the shadow of the Galactic Union. Your leaders have failed you. Your fleets are gone. Your technology is nothing but scrap." His yellow eyes narrowed as he leaned closer to the screen. "Surrender now, and we will spare your planet. Resist, and you will be erased." The message ended. Fear spread through the streets like wildfire. Earth's leaders gathered in panic. They had no army, no defense. The Galactic Union ships could destroy them in minutes. The High Council met in secret. It didn't take long for them to agree on what they believed was their only option. They would surrender. They sent a message back to Zorak, agreeing to his terms without a single shot fired. Zorak watched the message come through. He turned to his officers and smiled. "Begin the landing operations," Zorak ordered. "We take Earth without a fight." But Zorak had made a mistake. He had forgotten about Elias Kane. Far below the surface, in Hangar 17, Elias and his crew had heard the message too. They had watched the High Council surrender. Elias clenched his fists in anger. He knew the Union had no intention of letting Earth live in peace. Surrender would only bring control, slavery, or worse. He stood in front of his crew. "This is it," Elias said. "We launch now. We stop them or we die trying. Sera no dead firmly. Let's make them regret coming here." Tanner grinned. Time to wake up the galaxy. Dr. Lin and Reed gave silent nods, ready to follow their captain. The crew moved to their stations. JF007 systems hummed as the engines powered up again. The ship shuddered but held together. The repairs had worked. The ship was still dangerous, but it was alive. Elias activated the hangar launch controls. The ground shook as the heavy doors above them slid open, revealing the night sky. The old launch lights turned green. "Let's go," Elias ordered. Tanner grabbed the controls and fired the engines. JF007 lifted off the ground with a roar, breaking through the hangar roof and rising into the sky. The people of New London stopped and stared as a strange, rusted ship climbed into the stars. Most had never seen it before. Many didn't know what it was. But Elias and his crew knew exactly what they were flying. Earth's last chance. As they broke through the atmosphere, the crew got their first real look at the Galactic Union's fleet. The sight was terrifying. The enemy ships stretched across the stars, glowing with power. Earth looked small, trapped, helpless. Sarah checked the scanners. "They've seen us," she said. "They're locking weapons." Elias stood tall in the center of the bridge. "Let them look," he said calmly. "Let them think we're nothing." Tanner grinned. "They already do." Reed armed the ship's weapons. "Ready when you are, Captain." Elias looked out at the sea of enemy ships. He knew they were outnumbered. He knew the ship could fail at any moment. But he also knew they had something the Union didn't expect. "Surprise." "Hold your fire," Elias ordered. "Let's get closer first." The crew stayed quiet, trusting their captain. JF007 drifted toward the enemy fleet. On the enemy sensors, it looked like a broken ship, barely holding together. The Galactic Union commanders laughed. Some didn't even bother to move their ships. Zorak watched the strange, rusted ship approach. He frowned. "What is that?" he muttered. One of his officers replied, "It appears to be an old prototype, sir. No threat, Zorak waved his hand. Ignore it. Let them see our power up close. But Zorak didn't know who was flying it. He didn't know the ship's real strength. And he didn't know that Elias Kane had just armed the ship's secret weapon. Elias turned to his crew. We hit them first, he said. We show them what Earth's scrap can do. The crew locked in their targets. Tanner pushed the engines to full power. The ship shot forward. Zorak's officers scrambled as they realized the ship was moving faster than they expected. Sir, it's charging the fleet, one officer shouted. Zorak's eyes widened. Destroy it, he ordered. Too late. Elias gave the final command. Fire! The ship's unstable weapons roared to life, blasting the nearest warships. Explosions lit up the darkness. Metal and fire filled the void. The enemy fleet broke formation in shock. Earth's last ship had just drawn first blood. Zorak stood frozen, watching the screens in disbelief. His face twisted with rage. Who is commanding that ship? He shouted. Elias leaned forward on his bridge, looking at the stars ahead. Remember us now, he whispered. The battle had begun. The blast from JF007's surprise attack echoed through space. Two of the Union's heavy warships were gone in seconds. Fires burned in the wreckage. Small debris floated past JF007's cracked hull. The crew could barely believe what they had done. Sarah looked at the screens in shock. We actually hit them. Elias didn't smile. He knew better. They won't make that mistake again. And he was right. Across the fleet, alarms screamed. Union ships scrambled to reposition. Shields came online. Cannons charged. The mocking silence was gone. Now, Earth's scrap ship had their full attention. High Commander Zorak Vel stood on the bridge of the Titanus Rex, his claws tightening into fists. Bring that ship down, he roared. I want it burned to ash. The fleet began to move. Hundreds of ships turned toward JF007. Lasers flashed. Missiles launched. The darkness of space lit up like a deadly storm. Inside JF007, the crew felt the ship shake violently. Shields holding barely. Serachuted. Tanner gripped the flight controls tightly. We can't outrun all of them, Captain. Elias made his choice fast. We don't outrun them. We go deeper. He pointed to the thickest part of the enemy fleet, where their formation was tightest. Tanner stared. You want to fly right through the middle of that? It's the only way to get close enough to do real damage, Elias answered. They won't expect it. Tanner gritted his teeth, but obeyed. Strap in. The engines screamed as Tanner pushed the ship toward the heart of the enemy lines. Enemy fire rained down around them. Shields flared. Metal groaned. The ship shook under the pressure. Sparks flew from the control panels. Warning lights blinked red. Dr. Lin checked the power core readings. The core is unstable again. We're pushing it too hard. Elias glanced back at her. Can you hold it? Dr. Lin nodded nervously. For now. Reed fired back with the ship's plasma cannons, blasting smaller fighters out of their path. Keep firing. Elias shouted. Clear the way. Inside the Union fleet, panic spread. No one had expected the rusted ship to survive the first strike. Now it was tearing through the formation like a blade through paper. Zorak slammed his fist on the console. Where are our heavy cruisers? He demanded. They're moving to intercept. Commander, an officer replied. Back on JF007, Sarah called out again. 3 heavy cruisers incoming. They're blocking our path. Elias narrowed his eyes. He knew they didn't have the firepower to face them head-on. He thought fast. Tanner, take us under their formation. Get us below their scanners. Copy that, Tanner replied. Tanner spun the ship hard, diving under the enemy cruisers. JF007 rolled through the enemy's blind spot, skimming dangerously close to their hulls. Reed locked in the weapons. Targets locked, he called out. Fire everything, Elias ordered. The ship's unstable plasma cannons roared again. Bright blue energy blasts shot into the engines of the cruisers. One by one, the cruisers erupted in flames, spinning out of control. On the Titanus Rex, Zorak's face twisted with rage. Pull back the fleet, he shouted. Collapse the formation. Trap them. The Union ships began to close in, trying to surround JF007 on all sides. Sarah's voice filled the bridge. "We're boxed in, Captain." Elias looked around. The enemy ships were closing fast. There was nowhere left to run. "New plan," Elias said. "We make them follow us." Tanner turned, surprised. "Where?" Elias pointed toward a nearby asteroid field on the edge of the system. "They'll be too big to follow us through there. But we're small enough to slip inside." Tanner didn't waste a second. "Hold on tight." The engines roared again as JF007 sped toward the asteroid field. The enemy fleet chased after them, firing wildly. The ship dodged rock after rock, weaving through the field. Large Union warships tried to follow, but struggled to turn fast enough. Some crashed into the rocks. Others pulled back, afraid of being torn apart. Zorak watched from his command ship. "They're hiding," he growled. "Let them run. Lock down the perimeter. We'll crush them when they come out." But Elias had other plans. Inside the asteroid field, JF007 slowed to a crawl. The crew caught their breath. Sparks still flew from damaged systems. The ship creaked under stress. Sarah checked the scanners. "We've lost half the shields. Weapons are down to 30%. Dr. Lin shook her head. "The core's holding, but it won't last much longer." Elias stood in the middle of the bridge. His mind worked through the problem. The ship was damaged. The crew was tired. The enemy was waiting just outside. They couldn't stay here forever. But as he looked at the glowing core on the screen, an idea began to form. A dangerous idea. He turned to his crew. "I have a plan," Elias said quietly. "But it's risky." Tanner leaned back in his seat. "Captain, everything we've done so far has been risky." Elias nodded. "This is worse." The crew listened closely as he explained the idea. Their faces turned serious. No one spoke for a moment. Finally, Reed broke the silence. "Crazy plan, but it just might work." "Sera smiled funny." "Of course it will. It's us." Tanner cracked his knuckles. "Let's do it." Dr. Lin nodded. "I'll keep the core stable as long as I can." Elias looked at them all, proud of what they had become together. "All right," he said. "Let's finish this." The crew prepared for the next move, knowing this could be their final run. Because Earth's scrap ship wasn't done yet. The asteroid field sat quiet and cold, hiding JF007 like a rusty blade waiting in the shadows. Outside the field, the Galactic Union's fleet circled like hungry wolves. Their formation stretched for miles, sealing every exit. On the bridge of the Titanus Rex, High Commander Zorak Vel waited with growing impatience. His yellow eyes locked on the edge of the asteroid field. "They're boxed in," Zorak said, speaking more to himself and his crew. "They have nowhere left to run." His officers stayed silent, knowing their commander hated waiting. But Zorak was right. Any ship reckless enough to leave the field would be torn apart before it cleared the rocks. Or so they believed. Deep inside the asteroid field, Elias Kane stood over the glowing image of the unstable power core. His plan was clear now. Dangerous, yes. But it was the only way to break the blockade and strike the heart of the Union's fleet. "We turn the ship into bait," Elias explained. "We draw them into the rocks where their size works against them." Sarah crossed her arms. "And when they take the bait," Elias pointed to the ship's core on the display. "We use the unstable charge. Overload the core. Create a blast big enough to cripple their command fleet." Tanner leaned back in his seat. "That's suicide." "No, Elias replied. It's strategy. We make them believe we're losing control. We let them think the ship is breaking apart. Then we blow the core when they close in." Dr. Lin spoke next. "And what happens to us, Captain?" Elias looked around at his crew. "We eject in the pods the second I trigger the overload. We escape before the blast." The crew exchanged uncertain looks. No one liked it, but they all knew there were no better options. Sarah spoke first. "We'll never get another shot like this." Reed loaded the last of the ship's weapons. "Let's give them something to remember." Elias nodded. "Take your stations. We move now." Tanner fired up the engines again. The ship rattled as it pushed forward, slipping between the floating rocks. The enemy fleet started picking up movement. "They see us," Sarah reported. "They're moving to intercept." Elias stood tall. "Good. Let them come." The Union's warships turned toward the asteroid field. Fighters launched in swarms, darting ahead of the larger ships. Zorak watched from the bridge, his claws tapping on the command rail. "Crush them the moment they clear the rocks," Zorak ordered. Inside JF007, the crew worked fast. Dr. Lin began to overload the power core slowly. Lights flickered. The ship trembled. Tanner flew straight toward the edge of the field, then jerked the ship hard, making it spin and roll out of control, just as planned. Sarah sent out a false distress signal. "This is JF007. Systems failing. Core unstable. Requesting immediate surrender." The enemy fleet paused, reading the message. Zorak leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "Catch them. Drag them out." Union warships pushed deeper into the field, ignoring the risks. Inside JF007, Reed armed the last plasma charge. 30 seconds to core overload, Dr. Lin warned. She won't hold much longer. Elias turned his crew one last time. "This is it. You know what to do." The crew nodded. No fear in their eyes, only loyalty. Tanner set the ship on auto course toward the Titanus Rex. All set. Sarah triggered the pod launch system. "Ready." Dr. Lin locked the core overload sequence. Countdown started. Reed loaded his sidearm and smiled. "Let's give him hell." The ship shook harder as the core reached critical levels. Sparks flew. Metal panels ripped loose. The ship looked like it was falling apart, just as they had planned. Elias moved to the emergency pod bay. "Go," he ordered. One by one, the crew climbed into the pods. Elias stayed back, locking the controls. He set the final timer. 5 minutes. He looked at his ship one last time. The ship they had built, the ship the world had called worthless. But Elias knew better. He climbed into the last pod and sealed the hatch. The pods launched silently, slipping through the asteroid field, hiding among the debris. The Union fleet closed in, sensing their victory. Zorak's officers cheered as they prepared to deliver the final blow. But then, the core inside JF007 flared bright. Too bright. Zorak's eyes widened in horror. "Get back," he shouted. "Get back now." It was too late. The core exploded. A wave of energy ripped through the field, tearing through metal, rock, and ships alike. The nearest warships shattered instantly. The shockwave spread faster than they could escape. The Titanus Rex rocked violently. Consoles exploded. Officers were thrown across the bridge. Zorak grabbed the rail, staring at the destruction swallowing his fleet. "No, no, 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 Ischautiv." The fleet broke apart, torn to pieces by the blast. And in the middle of it all, JF007 was gone, taking half of the Galactic Union's Armada with it. The escape pods floated silently away, hidden by the wreckage and debris. Inside one of them, Elias watched the destruction on a small screen. Sarah's voice crackled through the pod's radio. "Did we get them?" Elias smiled for the first time in days. "We got them." The crew floated in silence, watching as what was left of the fleet burned in space. Earth's broken ship had done the impossible. The mighty Armada had fallen. The explosion had changed everything. For a few long minutes, there was no movement, no communication, just silence, broken only by the distant crackle of destroyed ships and drifting debris. In the shadows of that massive blast, 7 small escape pods floated quietly, hidden among the broken remains of the Galactic Union's war fleet. Inside one of them, Elias Kane kept his eyes on the data screen. The blast radius had reached farther than expected. It had taken out more than half the Armada. The rest of the fleet was scattered, trying to regroup. The center command had been broken. Elias exhaled slowly. It had worked, but it wasn't over. Across the radio, Sarah's voice came through, tight, shaken, but alive. "Everyone's still with us." One by one, the crew checked in. Tanner, Dr. Lin, Reed, they were all alive. Bruised, rattled, but breathing. Dr. Lin's voice was calm but firm. "Radiation levels are rising around us. We need to move fast." Elias nodded to himself. "Agreed." We regroup and head for the secondary rendezvous point. The pods fired small thrusters and began drifting through the wreckage. They had planned this escape carefully. A supply ship was waiting behind one of Jupiter's moons, cloaked and power down to avoid detection. But even with the success of the core overload, Elias knew the fight wasn't finished. Not while Zorak Vel was still alive. Far from the escape pods, aboard the damaged Titanus Rex, chaos filled the bridge. Sparks flew from shattered consoles. Flames licked across metal walls. Dozens of Zorak's officers were dead or wounded. The once mighty command ship was now barely holding together. Zorak stood in the middle of the smoke-filled command deck, his cloak torn, one arm bleeding. His golden armor was cracked, and rage filled his eyes. A junior officer stumbled toward him, coughing through the smoke. "Commander, more than half the fleet is gone. The Earth ship, it was a trap." Zorak turned slowly, towering over the young officer. "I know what it was," he growled. He shoved the officer aside and looked out at the drifting field of wreckage. He clenched his fists. "I underestimated them," he said. "That won't happen again." Then, with a burst of fury, he slammed his clawed fist into the control panel. "Find the survivors," he roared. "I want Kane's head. Now." Back near the asteroid field, Elias and the crew reached the cloaked supply ship. It was small, built for stealth, but it had enough power to get them where they needed to go. As the crew climbed aboard and rejoined each other, the first real moment of peace settled over them. Tanner leaned against a wall, wiping blood from his brow. Hell of a way to crash a party. Sarah dropped into a chair, exhausted. "They said we were a scrap planet. We just tore half the Union fleet apart." Reed checked a console. "We still have a problem." Zorak lived. Elias nodded. "He'll come after us." Dr. Lin sat across from him. "We could disappear. Hide Earth. Let them think we're finished." But Elias shook his head. "No," he said. "If we stop now, they'll come back. And next time, Earth won't be ready." He looked at the small crew. All of them had risked everything. None of them had turned back. They had rebuilt a broken ship and used it to cripple the strongest armada in the galaxy. Now they had one job left. "We finish what we started," Elias said. "We find Zorak, and we end this." The crew got to work. Their stealth ship wasn't meant for battle, but with Sarah's upgrades and Reed's modifications, it could hit hard and fast, just enough to strike a single target. They set a course for the last known location of the Titanus Rex. The ship's trail was faint, damaged by the blast, but traceable. Zorak was limping through the system, trying to reach backup forces near Neptune's orbit. Elias and his crew beat him there. They found the Titanus Rex drifting in silence, engines flickering. Its shields were weak. Repairs were halfway finished. Several smaller ships surrounded it, protecting it like guards around a wounded king. The crew prepared for the final run. Elias stood before them. "This isn't just about survival anymore," he said. "It's about sending a message. They thought Earth was a graveyard. Let's make sure Zorak remembers who lit the fire." Tanner activated the engines. Sarah took the weapons console. Dr. Lin stabilized the power. Reed locked in the targeting systems. The stealth ship blasted forward. Enemy scanners picked them up too late. Missiles flew past the Titanus Rex's guards and slammed directly into the exposed hull. The ship rocked. Fires burst from the side. Elias gave the final order. "Hit the bridge. End it now." Reed fired the main cannon. The blast cut through the Titanus Rex's weakened shields and exploded against the command tower. Inside, Zorak saw the fire coming. He stood tall, his eyes burning with hatred. He let out one final scream, and then everything vanished in light and flame. The Titanus Rex was gone. The last of the fleet scattered. Elias and his crew drifted in silence, watching the fire fade. Reed let out a breath. "It's done." Dr. Lin checked the readings. No more signals. No more threats. Sarah leaned back in her chair. "We made it." Tanner smiled tiredly. "We just took down the most powerful fleet in the galaxy with a death trap and spare parts." Elias looked out the window at the stars. "Not bad," he said softly. They had saved Earth. They had broken the pride of the Galactic Union. They had turned forgotten metal into legend. And now, the galaxy would remember. 2 weeks later, Earth's sky was clear again. But this time it was different. The mocking jokes were gone. The laughter from alien broadcasters had stopped. The endless news streams that once called Earth the scrap planet had fallen silent. Across the galaxy, races who had once laughed now watched with fear and respect. The Galactic Union's mighty fleet had been shattered. Its greatest warship, the Titanus Rex, had been destroyed, and the name Elias Kane had spread across the stars like wildfire. On Earth, people gathered in the streets. They stood on rooftops. They lined the spaceports, waiting. The High Council, the same leaders who had once surrendered without a fight, now stood on the grand stage of New London, nervously watching the skies. They knew who the real heroes were, and they knew the people were no longer looking at them. They were looking up. High above Earth, the stealth ship carrying Elias and his crew slowly entered orbit. Elias stood at the viewing window, his hands resting on the cold glass. Below, his home planet spun peacefully, looking small compared to the chaos they had left behind in the outer systems. Sarah stood beside him. "You ready to explain how you just rewrote Earth's place in the galaxy?" Elias didn't answer right away. Tanner leaned back in his seat. "Hope they have a proper landing pad this time. I'm not scraping this ship on another rooftop." Reed checked his gear one last time, cracking his neck. "Or they could throw us in jail for stealing a prototype and blowing up half the solar system." Dr. Lin gave a quiet, tired smile. "I doubt they'll dare." Elias finally turned to face them all. "We didn't do this for medals," he said. "We didn't do this for politics." The crew fell silent, listening. "We did it because someone had to," Elias continued. "We did it because Earth deserved better." The crew nodded in agreement. They knew. They had lived it. The ship touched down at New London's main landing platform. The crowd roared the moment the hatch opened. People cheered. Some cried. Others waved flags of old Earth colonies long forgotten. Elias stepped out first, his boots hitting the steel ramp with slow, steady steps. His crew followed close behind. The High Council waited nervously at the edge of the stage, unsure if they should speak or step aside. Elias stopped in front of the crowd. He looked around at the faces of his people. He didn't need a microphone. His voice carried with strength and purpose. "They called us the Scrap Planet," Elias began. "They laughed at our ships. They mocked our people. They thought we were weak, broken." He paused, letting his words sink in. But they were wrong. The crowd quieted, leaning in to hear every word. They forgot who we are. They forgot that even in the dark, Earth never stops fighting. They forgot that even from scrap, you can build something the galaxy will fear. Elias raised his hand, pointing to the sky. "We proved them wrong. Not with perfect ships, not with polished steel, but with heart, with loyalty, and with courage." The crowd erupted in cheers. Flags waved high. Voices shouted his name. Later that night, Elias and his crew stood on the edge of the city, away from the crowds and flashing lights. Sarah looked up at the stars. "So what happens next?" Elias stood beside her, looking toward the dark sky where the battle had begun. "They'll come again," he said quietly. "Someone always does." Reed let out a short laugh. "Let them." Dr. Lin smiled faintly. "We'll be ready." Tanner crossed his arms. "And this time, we'll build our own fleet." The crew stood together, watching the stars. They knew the fight wasn't over, but they also knew they had already changed everything. No one would ever mock Earth again. And when the galaxy spoke of Earth's last, broken ship, the one they had laughed at, the one they had called dangerous scrap, they would remember the name JF007. And they would remember the crew that turned forgotten metal into legend. "Never underestimate the forgotten," Elias whispered to himself. The stars twinkled silently in reply.